I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to welcome you to Redwood City Pulse's first ever Candidates Forum. My name is Michelle Iracheta. I'm the editor at the Pulse, and I'll be your host tonight. Joining me is Leah Worthington. She's my colleague and your reporter. Tonight, we are pleased to have with us 5 candidates who are running for City Council this November in the newly created districts of 2, 5, and 6. All of the candidates present tonight: Margaret Becker, Kaya Eakin, Allison Madden, Jerome Madigan, Chris Sturkin, are new faces to City Hall. Only 2 districts in this election have multiple candidates: Districts 2 and 6. District 2 includes candidates Margaret Becker, Allison Madden, and Chris Sturkin. District 6 includes Jerome Madigan and Diane Howard. Now, Diane Howard has expressed her regrets, and she will not be joining us tonight due to a prior engagement. Diane has also provided a letter, which I will read in part. She says, "I am so sorry that I am unable to join you for the Pulse's Meet the Candidates Forum tonight. Although I am a candidate running in District 6, I want to assure you that I will always listen and address the needs of everyone in Redwood City, including my district. This is what I've always done every year, and I promise to continue to do so." Diane has provided her cell phone number, and if you guys want to write this down, I will give that to you now. Here it is. Go get your phone. 650-208-4774. All right. And last but not least, we have in District 5, Kaya Eakin. So let me tell you a little bit about us. In 2021, the Redwood City Pulse launched with the goal of bringing local community news to Redwood City residents. We want to provide residents with accurate and reliable information to the community so that you can decide how to respond to the issues that impact your daily lives. One of our most valuable resources since we began this venture has been you, our readers. This is true. We rely heavily on the feedback we get from you. I read every single one of your emails, honestly. In fact, a number of the questions we'll be asking tonight come from many of the Pulse's readers who responded to our emails in a survey we sent asking what they think are the biggest issues facing Redwood. Thank you for your contributions. In this forum, we want to give you the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates on issues that will help you decide who would best represent your views on the City Council. So I said a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and hand this off to Leah for the next part.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So for instructions and the rest of that, so what we're going to do is we have a time limit for the responses. We're going to ask our candidates to wait until they're called before they answer each question. There's a timer on the screen that you should be able to see that will let the candidates and the audience know how much time has been allotted for each question. And we're going to mix it up a little bit as we go to keep things interesting. So some questions will be 60 seconds, others will allow 45, 30, or 15 seconds to respond. Also in this forum, we wanted to allow for a little bit more discussion if that arises. So all of our candidates will be allowed to challenge each other on questions if they do not agree or if they have some sort of response. They will have 3 opportunities to do so. The candidates can challenge any other candidate, even candidates who are not running in the same district. They will have 45 seconds for their challenge. Once a candidate is challenged, they will have a 30-second rebuttal. And I think that that is all. So we're going to start tonight's forum by asking the candidates an opening question. We asked each candidate to choose one question out of 3, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to get started.
Okay, so the questions that we gave the candidates to choose from are the following. Tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't already know. How would you define success as a city council member? And give us 3 reasons that made you decide to run for public office. And we're going to start with Margaret. Margaret, tell us which question you chose, or which one of these you chose, and then you have 30 seconds, and then we're going to go to Kaya.
Great. I chose number 3. And the reason I'm running for city council is because I love Redwood City. I've lived here for 20 years. I raised my kids here. And so that is the first reason. But I also see some real needs on city council right now. I think we really need to have council members who are connected to the residents and who are responsive to constituents. I also see an opportunity for council members who are listeners, collaborators, and consensus builders. And that is what I've been doing for the past 6 years on our Housing and Human Concerns Committee.
Wow, that was great. Okay, that was perfect timing, actually. Okay, so the next question, or the next one, goes to Kaya. Which question did you choose? Yes, go.
I choose to question number 2. How would you define success as a city council member? I would just define success as being able for all of the residents of District 5 to feel that they are well represented, and also the residents of all of Redwood City. So that means that they feel welcome at City Hall, that they feel that if they have ideas or concerns, they can come to me. I'm not going to say that I solve everything with a magic wand, but I would connect them.
All right, okay. And the next one would go Jerome. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Allison.
Thank you. So I also picked number 3, and give us 3 reasons that made me decide to run for public office. And I thought of the real estate maxim offhand: location, location, location. But for me, it was housing, housing, housing. And for me also, the housing means affordability and home ownership, with a real diverse and equitable population where people can live and work in Redwood City. And so even though you asked for 3, I wanted to say also that right now I'm really cognizant of the manifestation of several things happening now that started in the 80s. Is that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Time. All right, and then we're going to move on to Jerome and then Chris.
Great, thank you. I chose number 2. How would you define success as a city council member? And I would say I would want to leave the city in better shape than when I started, of course. And what does that mean? That would mean a city that's safer, cleaner, better equipped to house people at all levels, better equipped to serve people who need mental health support, and a balanced budget, of course. I have a lot of dreams and a lot of ideas, but I would say the biggest success I could hope for as a council member would be to have people say of me, he always listened well, he worked hard for residents, and he truly cared.
All right, okay, Chris.
Thank you. I also chose number 3. I'm running because I have a passion for public service ever since 2016, when I got involved in local politics in housing. And I have personal first-hand experience getting people into permanent housing. And finally, I believe that representation matters. I'm a renter. I'm a member of the LGBTQ+ community, and those communities need to be and continue to be represented on council. Thank you.
Awesome, great. Thank you guys for your answers. We're going to move on to a 60-second round, and we're going to talk a little bit about housing and homelessness, everyone's favorite topic. And I think this is something that's very important. Earlier this summer, we had our State of the City, and the entire State of the City was dedicated to this topic. So let's get into it. During the county's one-day homeless count conducted in February of this year, officials found that the homeless population in the county had grown by 21% from 2019 to 2022. Redwood City has the highest population of people experiencing homelessness in the county. Why do you think that is, and how do you plan to address it? And we're going to start with Kaya.
Thank you. So we do have the highest population of homeless, and it's usually the case. Why is that? We're the county seat. The weather is good. We also have the jails here in Redwood City, so that could be some of the reasons. And we need to be addressing this, and we are. We have the navigation center being constructed right now. Recently, we've spent $3.5 million on addressing the homeless issue, which is a complex issue. In conjunction with San Mateo County and the state of California, we've purchased 2 hotels to convert them into homeless navigation centers. What do they call it? Wraparound care and wraparound services. And these are all things that we have done. It's not enough, but we're working on it.
Great, thank you, Kaya. We're going to move on, and this is this same question to Allison.
Okay, there's so many things. I think from the first meeting, I would start speaking to the public about repealing Article 34 with the loss of redevelopment, using actual tax funds to build to every appropriate level of housing has been curtailed. I would advocate repealing Article 34 and having a social housing referendum. I would identify every property we have for land trusts, tiny homes, permanent RV lots, where appropriate, safe camp lots, mobile home lots, and affordable floating communities. Most people know I represented the people at Docktown. I do believe I can get our $25 million back that never should have been spent to evict an at-risk floating community. And I would also like to say a lot of the things that Ms. Eakin specified are county level. The county general assistance is not enough. I would work with the county to identify how to make that process more streamlined. People, it's hard to get it. People lose it quickly. It's half of what people need for the most basic housing needs.
I think that was more than.
Sorry,
That was more than time. Sorry, that was my mistake. I should have been paying
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Jerome, you're next.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, we do continue to see a rise in our homeless population. And like it's been mentioned, and like you all know, this is a very complicated issue, and it's not one that's going to be solved in one specific way. We need to work with lots of different agencies, and those agencies include law enforcement, they include mental health professionals, and they also include addiction specialists. There's a lot of people who are addicted on the street, and sometimes we address one part of the problem, but then we don't address the core part of the problem. So of course, building housing is one of them. We got the navigation center, great step in the right direction. I'm a huge fan of that project. I'm really excited about it, excited about seeing what happens with it. But if we don't support people on the other end, especially around addiction and mental health issues, then they're going to continue to repeat patterns. So it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of agencies to work together is the answer that I have.
Thanks, Jerome. Okay, we're going to move on. Chris.
Thank you. One of the biggest reasons I would say for the increase in homelessness is as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though we had an eviction moratorium and other protections, people still fell through the cracks. And how I would address homelessness is a 3-pronged approach. Firstly, we need to keep people housed to begin with by strengthening our tenant protections and building more affordable homes with supportive services for those with struggling with mental health or with addiction, and expand our partnerships with our local nonprofits like HIP Housing, like Moves, Habitat for Humanity, the Fair Oaks Community Center, that are there to support our residents in keeping them housed, getting them assistance, and getting them into affordable housing.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, Margaret, last but not least, Margaret.
Yeah, you did mention the homeless count at the beginning of this, and I can tell you, as a regular person who goes out and does the homeless count, I've seen firsthand and heard these people's stories, and they are heartbreaking. And I agree with some of my colleagues who have said that we need a multi-pronged approach. There is no single solution to homelessness. I do think that being at the county seat, that's one of the reasons why Redwood City currently has 22% of the homeless in San Mateo County. We have the most resources. And in turn, back to solutions, I also agree with the partnerships that we have, for example, with county and Life Moves that resulted in the creation of the Navigation Center. With that center as a short-term solution for over 200 people, that's going to make a huge difference in addressing homelessness. There's a $2 million grant that recently was announced by the county, and Redwood City will be taking advantage of those monies as well.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to move on to high density housing. We're going to start with Allison, and then we're going to move on to Jerome. So let's talk about SB 10. What's your stance on SB 10? Do you support increasing high density housing in Redwood City? And if so, where?
So one thing Redwood City has not fallen down on is high density housing. And so we have a lot of it. East of 101, where I live and where people know I've been evicted from, and the floating communities have been. East of 101, we used to have 800 floating units, and they've all been evicted for upland, high density, high-end luxury, maximum density units per acre housing, but none of it was affordable. So I support requiring, I think now there's been some movement in state law, of course, requiring a healthy percentage to be low income, and that has not occurred. On the east of 101, I would bring back floating communities, and I would also bring back, keep the mobile home lots permanent there. I do support high density, and I think that we should find where to put it. I think we can add even to some existing buildings downtown, some of the retail. I support live work situations and loft.
Okay. Jerome.
Okay, yeah. Housing, building housing, it's always at top of mind, you know, for me, of course, and many people in the city. Careful creation of sustainable housing at all levels is really important. And I think, first of all, I would say with development, the first thing that I would like to see is for us to make sure that we take the temperature of the community, okay? Because people are talking about development, and there is a lot of talk about different projects. I don't want to name any projects out right now, but people are speaking out about how much development is taking place. Doesn't mean that we don't develop. It doesn't mean that we don't build more housing. It means that we need to make sure that we're listening to everybody in the city about how much is being built. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that I don't want to talk about housing without talking about transportation. And so for me, if we're going to build high density, it needs to be transit oriented. And we also need to be thinking about innovative types of transportation if we're going to be building more housing.
That is time. Thank you so much, Jerome. All right. And we are moving on to Chris.
Thank you. So SB 10 focuses on transit-oriented development and housing, right? While preserving naturally affordable homes along transit that are, a smaller density, smaller apartment buildings, to not displace current residents from the community. And so where I think high density should go is, again, along transit corridors. We have an opportunity at the transit district for density along Woodside Road, along El Camino, in the downtown Precise Plan area, which is just downtown, and also on shopping centers and strip malls. Those, I think, would be appropriate places for high density development, for more homes to be built.
Okay, great. Margaret.
Yes, I actually have been a very proactive leader when it comes to housing for the past 6 years. And as the current chair of our Housing and Human Concerns Committee, there are many policies that I have supported and even helped to develop. First of all, we need housing at every level of affordability, including extremely low income. On our Housing and Human Concerns Committee, we've done a lot of work to develop ideas, very creative ideas for providing extremely low income housing. And I think the timing might be right if I were elected to council to relook at those ideas: tiny homes, workforce housing, modular housing. I do support high density. I definitely think that the transit district and the redevelopment of Sequoia Station is going to provide a huge opportunity for more density. I also support a home buyer program that we lost when our redevelopment funds went away, so that people can be first-time home buyers can purchase a home.
Thank you. Kaya. Sorry, you're muted, Kaya. Can you restart the timer, please?
Thank you. So SB 10 is a state law that is imposing a law on city planning and superimposing that. And so we don't have a choice. We have to comply with it. I think the devil will be in the details, and I think that still is to be ironed out. And I would just like to say that Redwood City has done a great deal more than some of the neighboring cities in terms of their regional housing needs assessments. We really have been doing yeoman's work historically and in the last 5 and 10 years. Is it enough? No. And, you know, thank goodness for people like Margaret, who have been spearheading all sorts of creative ideas. It's like a science lab, her committee, and we need to do that and more. And the state is putting the onus on us to do more.
Thank you, Kaya. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. Renters protections. And the question is, we're gonna start with Chris. No, I'm sorry, we're gonna start with Jerome. Redwood City recently adopted a revised anti-displacement strategy. Do you think the strategy does enough to protect renters? If not, what would you add or change?
I think we're talking about long-term sustainability of housing and stability of housing of people who are in houses, in homes. And so do I think it's enough? You know, I think whenever we're talking about housing sustainability and people staying in a stable place, I like to talk more about finding more programs and more ways to support people to get into homes to own. So what I would add to any kind of anti-displacement strategy would be to add first-time home buyer programs and to partner with programs and nonprofits that are centered around providing assistance for down payment, for equity shares. There's a myriad of state money and funding for this kind of thing, and we need to do a better job of directing people to being able to buy homes so that they can build generational wealth for them and their families and future generations.
All right, Chris.
Thank you. I think the city has done a great job protecting our residents through the anti-displacement strategy. But one strategy that's missing is a red tag relocation ordinance. And for those of you who may not know what that is, if a home is deemed uninhabitable because it's infested with bed bugs or electrical issues, whatever it may be, we would work with the landlord to rehab the unit and assist their tenant with relocation expenses, so paying rent elsewhere in the community they live in, work in, go to school in, while they rehab the unit, and then give that resident, that our neighbor, right of return back to that unit after it's been rehabbed. One of my neighbors currently is going through this process, and so I really do believe that we need red tag relocation ordinance as well. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Margaret.
Yeah, I guess it's hard for me to answer this without backing up just a little bit and giving a little bit of a history here. The the anti-displacement plan actually began because the former chair of Housing and Human Concerns and I, Kathy Recht, we went out on a limb, approached Stanford University and started doing research on housing preservation. We got 2 Stanford University graduate school programs involved to do large scale reports that then were turned into the anti-displacement plan. We also applied for a grant to get a fellow to help us, and had 3 ad hoc committees on housing and human concerns going over the details of the anti-displacement plan. I agree with it. I think it does a great job of addressing some of the tenant protections that we as a committee had tried to address in years before. And I think it does a great job of outlining how to preserve some of our affordable units. I also am going to agree with Mr. Sturken about the reg tag on the anti-displacement.
Right. Okay, great. Kaya.
Well, I just, in this general theme, I'd also like to point out that California law, AB 1482, implemented again on the state level just cause eviction law, which strengthened the rights of tenants. And the city of Redwood City also passed a law that tenants can, at their discretion, choose to insist on a year lease that's written, so that that gives them a little bit more stability. And then, of course, there's also the cap on rent increases. So is it enough? No, but Redwood City is working with other state and governmental agencies. And I'd also point out that Redwood City gave away $1.5 million in rent reimbursement to people during COVID. Oh, I'm out of time.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison.
Thank you. Yes, I very much support what Redwood City has done to start. I think there's a 2-year time frame, and if elected, I would participate and really contribute to this. It is true that the state passed a high-level just cause ordinance. It's got a lot of carve-outs and limitations. I'm right now representing the boaters at Oyster Cove Marina who are being evicted, and their scenario isn't covered by the just cause eviction state law. So I advocated to South San Francisco to step in and help them there. I also think relocation benefits at the local level need to be enhanced, even for private displacement. Right now with Docktown, we established that the Relocation Act applied. The city denied it, and we knew from day one that it applied. It provides for 3.5 years rent differential. Now, maybe Redwood City might not require that length, but I think we should look with anti-displacement at vigorous tenant protections to keep people in their housing, and relocation benefits if they're evicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, this is the final question in this round, and then we're going to move on to a 45-second round. So the question is, we're going to start with Chris. The question is, what is the biggest hurdle to the development of more affordable housing in Redwood City, and how specifically do you plan to overcome it? Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I would say the number one challenge is financing, just funding affordable housing, which is why you often see so many proposed homes and housing units coupled with office projects in Redwood City, because the revenue generated by the office is subsidizing the affordable housing. Now, with that said, 100% affordable housing projects, do benefit from and can be financed through low-income housing tax credits and other sources of income, but there's often that missing middle that is the most challenging to finance, and why you see housing coupled with office projects here in Redwood City. So going forward, we need to continue, working with developers to get more affordable homes out of projects. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Margaret, same question.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with Mr. Sturkin. It's the financing that is the problem. And I mentioned it earlier. We used to have redevelopment funds that was state monies to build affordable housing, and we no longer have those. So that makes it really difficult for our partners who are in the affordable housing construction business to be able to make it pencil out. There are creative ideas out there. There are ways that we can look for funding. There are organizations out there that can help. LISC, HEART, there, and the county's program for acquiring and preserving affordable units is another resource. So there are ideas out there for how to be able to find the funding. And I know that that's something that I've been creative in trying to look at this issue for a very long time. So I would look forward to continue to work on it.
Thank you. Kaya.
So I just want to push back a little bit on this concept that yes, we need partnerships, but if we overly partner with developers that are building office space, then we are just making the jobs housing imbalance worse. If we build a high rise that creates 7,000 new jobs for residents in Redwood City, and then we build 300 affordable housing units, it's not solving the problem. It's not taking the problem in the right direction. We do need partnerships. We do need partnerships with developers, but I would just say we need partnerships with sister cities, you know, the bordering cities. Redwood City already does much more than our bordering cities in terms of affordable housing. And I think we need to do more than look at developers.
Kaya, thank you. Allison.
Thanks. And would you mind repeating the exact question?
Of course, yes. Okay, so the question is, what is the biggest hurdle to development of more affordable housing in Redwood City, and how specifically do you plan to overcome it?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the biggest hurdle, again, is that I think Redwood City has done a good job of not the easy things, but the things that the developers that are here with plans and money we're ready to build. I don't think that we have actually tried to look to see where we can implement the really good ideas for the tiny home lots, the mobile home lots. There's things going on in Santa Cruz, taking a parking structure and making a tiny home lot out of it. All kinds of things are available when you have creative and divergent thinking. I think the money is there at the federal level. The county has so much money. The lieutenant governor got a lot of money for the ports, which is where Dogtown is. And I honestly do believe I can get that 25 million back. There's a few sources. And so one of the things is that Redwood City undertook that and evicted people in a time of a crushing housing crisis and sea level rise. And I think that we can add the housing element used to provide for the east of 101 liveaboards, and we can get some. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, great. We're going to move on to the 45-second round, and I'm going to have Leah take this one. This is on various topics. Thanks.
I think we need to have Jerome answer that.
Oh, I wasn't excluding you. Go ahead. Sorry, same question.
Yeah, I would say the biggest hurdle is, I have to say, financing, I would say, is number 2 hurdle. The number 1 hurdle is land. It's space. We don't have it. So, you know, when we talk about where to build, we can look around the county. We are 73% green in this county, so we can't build on 73% of it. And 2/3 of that developed land is single family homes. So just do the math. There's not a lot of land. So how do you do that? Well, you look at incentivizing sometimes good development of creative development of affordable housing, right? So, you know, yes, you can work with developers. I am kind of the opinion that we need to be much better at negotiating deals with developers. I feel like we've gotten a lot of bad deals in the last 10 or so years from development. Well, we've seen a ton of development money come here, and we have not benefited much from it, to be honest with you. I look at the long view of it, and we just haven't. So it's negotiation with developers to build more housing. Yes. But the other one is looking at naturally occurring affordable housing, of course, and then looking at how to help people build ADUs on their property and all that. So yeah.
That's time. Okay, did I miss anyone else? I'm so sorry. Okay, great. Now we're gonna go, Leah. You're gonna take over.
All right, we've got a 45-second round now, and we're going to be covering a variety of different topics and just jumping from one to the next. So the first thing we're going to talk about, one question for you all about climate and sea level rise and these environmental issues that we're facing. We're going to start with Margaret. The question is, sea level rise and flooding are growing threats to Redwood City, the Bayfront neighborhoods in particular. What would you do to protect our residents from becoming climate migrants or, being displaced because of climate issues? And I just want to, as a quick reminder to everyone, we're really interested in new ideas that you have. So try as much as possible, really focus on the new ideas that you have that you would implement, and less on what's already happening. All right, we're going to start with Margaret.
Okay, I just want to reiterate that how extreme the problem is. I read somewhere that, I think it was in the Redwood City Climate Action Plan, that with a 3.3 foot sea level rise, 59% of Redwood City would be vulnerable to flooding. So this is something that is knocking at our door right now. Redwood City is one of the most vulnerable cities in all of California when it comes to sea level rise. So we need to be proactive. We also, one of the most important things is we need to work with our neighbors. We can't address this in isolation. We need to be finding nature-based solutions instead of levees, and it needs to be across the board throughout all sorts of communities.
Margaret.
Oh,
thank you. I'm going to move on to Kaya.
I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with Margaret. And we can't have turf battles. I know that there's a joint power authority. The mobile home parks close to the bay are at very high risk. And there's a river, I want to see the San Joaquin Joint Power Authority, San Joaquin River Joint Power Authority. I could have the name a little off, but Menlo Park and a whole bunch of other jurisdictions are working on that specific place, that river that goes into the bay right there, and doing a regional solution. And I would encourage Redwood City to be part of that joint power authority and horizontal levees.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison.
I agree. There needs to be a lot of coordination and communication. I've recently read about the Redwood City's 1,000-year flood. The entire downtown would be flooded, and we really need to know that that could happen in our lifetime, if not our children's. I think we need to look at making sure there's a state resilience initiative, and it's no longer a time when one city can just make their levy, because when that happens, it makes the flow go somewhere else. We have to have the natural drainage systems, but also the entire bay-wide plan. And we need evacuation. I've been in a weekly working climate group for the last few years, which just passed State Bill 1230. It's for.
I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jerome.
Yeah, I know the city has a very aggressive climate action plan. So, we're good there. I'm looking at when we talk about sea level rise, we you can build seawalls, you can use pumps. There's a myriad of different technologies that you can use. I mean, I think the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring more people around the table to start really talking about the problem. So reaching out to, as it was already mentioned, reaching out to people, other cities, people. This is going to affect so many people in this area. So we need to really kind of reach this way and ask people to come to the table for innovative creative solutions around it. I would also say that, if you're looking for a good community benefit for a developer, that might be something that we start talking to them about and say, hey, look, this sea level rise is a problem. Let's talk about it.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Chris.
Thank you. So sea level rise is one of the biggest threats to my district, which is, of course, including downtown and Centennial and Bear Island. And so we need to tackle the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change and sea level rise, which are from transportation, through getting more EVs, electric vehicles, infrastructure in Redwood City, getting more people on transit, and expanding our bicycle and pedestrian network. But on the ground, I've talked to neighbors next to Cordilleras Creek who have already been flooding during wet winters, at the end of Alden Street in Centennial. And so we need more green infrastructure to capture that water and slow it before it gets to the bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, we're going to move on to a question about development. Question is, do you see continued commercial and residential development as an environmental concern? If so, how would you seek to balance a desire for growth with a need to protect our existing communities and environments? And we're going to start with Kaya.
So, this is a balance. Everything is a balance. And, one thing that we know for sure is that change is inevitable. So it's not a question of no growth or lots of growth. It's a question of smart growth versus non-optimal growth. I still think there are a lot of, Jerome mentioned that land is a problem. Sure, but there's a lot of underused land. There's a lot of not optimally used land. There's really a lot of opportunities for transit-oriented development, and we can't afford not to use those because climate change is going to happen, and we have to be smarter about our transit-oriented where we live.
Thank you. Allison. Oh, you are muted.
Sorry,
Yeah.
thanks. And thank you, Leah, for putting the question in the chat. I do think that we just need to be mindful of where we build the continued commercial and residential development and the high density. I do support less of the high density east of 101. I think it's perfect for adaptability. Jerome mentioned the mobile home lots and flooding. Right now, everything east of 101 is having a 6 to 8 foot raise, and the upland at Dogtown is being raised 6 feet, as was Pete's Harbor. We probably have to do something like that for the adaptable east of 101 housing, but there's a big opportunity there for very flexible, low impact housing. I do support transit oriented high density, and I do support live work. Like I was looking at, yeah.
Sorry, I hate cutting you off. Thank you.
Perfect, fine, thank you.
Okay, we've got Jerome next.
Well, in terms of building, there's a lot of technology that can help us to build better and to build greener and more sustainably. And that's something that's personally really exciting to me. I mean, if you build correctly, you can improve net water usage. A building can generate its own energy. We can get buildings to net zero. I mean, there's a lot of really exciting, we're in the middle of the Silicon Valley. We have some of the greatest innovative minds in the world here. And did you know there's a company, actually, on my spare time, I like to look at this stuff. Do you know there's a company that makes solar windows right in Redwood City? All of these kinds of technologies to make buildings more efficient and greener are coming up, and they're getting developed. And I think that we continue to, if we build right, we build sustainable, and we build better, then we're going to be in much better shape.
Thank you, Jerome. And Chris.
Thank you. So I'm for a Redwood City of neighbors for more neighbors, right? And so we have to build our way out of this housing crisis. And the way we do that is, again, along transit corridors, high density housing to create more affordable homes at all income levels for our residents, for our neighbors. And when we build, we can rely and leverage our reach codes as a way to ensure that our new development is as environmentally conscious as possible. And even by default, multifamily, high density housing is already more environmentally friendly. It doesn't have a yard, doesn't require watering the yard. And heating costs are lower because you have shared walls, all those things. So I'm for a Redwood City of neighbors for more neighbors, and that includes transit-oriented and high-density housing.
Thank you, Chris. And lastly, Margaret.
Yeah, so many ideas here. Redwood City's climate action plan actually outlines a lot of ideas in this regard. First of all, I just want to reiterate what someone else said. Recycled water is our future. And there's a way to really implement, use recycled water. We have plans for electrification. We need to fully implement Redwood City's REACH codes. I don't think they have been completely implemented yet, so that buildings are electrified completely. We also need permeable ground surfaces for water collection. We need to decarbonize transportation, again, along with our climate action plan.
Thank you, Margaret. All right, we are going to move on to the next question. Just a reminder that you do have the opportunity to challenge any other candidates if you so choose.
How do we challenge? I'm sorry, I just needed to ask what's the process for challenging?
Michelle, maybe a raised hand.
Yeah, so if for any reason you need to challenge someone, I would encourage you to just let a moderator know if, for instance, if Leah says something that I don't agree with, and there are 5 other candidates on the list, I would just let the moderator know that I don't agree with something that Leah said, and all the candidates would have to go. And then after everyone goes and speaks, then I would challenge that person. And then I would have 45 seconds to say what my challenge is. And then that person who was challenged would have a 30-second rebuttal. Does that kind of make sense?
Right. So I just wanted to revisit something that one of my opponents said. So do I raise my hand or?
Yeah, you can tell me. So who are you challenging?
I just wanted to challenge Chris Sturkin on something that he just said.
Okay, so let's put 45 seconds on the timer, and then you go ahead and challenge what he said. So you can go ahead and say something.
Okay, it won't even take me 45 seconds. I just, anytime anybody says that we need to build our way out of this housing crisis, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, because we have been building and building and building. And the only way we've been able to build is by building places where there are jobs and also sometimes housing, but we can't just keep building. The jobs to housing imbalance just keeps getting exacerbated. So that is not the answer. We need much more creative solutions. I'd just like to ask Mr. Sturkin how he plans to build our way out of the crisis.
Okay, and Chris, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Thank you. And thanks for your challenge, Margaret. So we are making up for decades of a lack of building homes. And so that's, a reason why I propose that we continue building more housing. But in addition to that, we need to make more effective use of existing housing. And that's where I come in. That's my specialty, having worked for HIP Housing and worked in the home sharing program and helped people open up their homes to new neighbors, to new housemates.
Okay, thank you both. Yeah, and feel free again to raise your hand if you would like to challenge another opponent. Okay, taxes. Let's talk about taxes. So our city is facing multi-million-dollar operating deficits. So this is one of the questions from our listeners. How exactly would you propose to close the gap? If cost cutting, what are some specific examples of things you would consider cutting? If a new tax, would you tax residents, businesses, or both? We're going to start with Allison. And Michelle, do you mind putting the question in the chat? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have been looking at the consent items. We spend millions of dollars a year on the consent item, and very rarely is anything taken off consent and challenged. Recently, there was an OpenGov $650,000 expenditure on consent that a citizen asked to take off. I've been in Silicon Valley tech companies. That was my first career. And I know that you can negotiate better. You can scale back the scope. You can change features and functions, levels of support. I would look at every line item I think we have a regressive business license tax. I also know that the tax subcommittee is going to recommend raising your taxes. They just did a sales tax. That was after they announced the $25 million from Dogtown. I would get that back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to Jerome.
Yeah, so if I read the budget correctly, it looks like we are looking at a $11.1 million budget deficit. That's with a 2% staffing vacancy is what I read. You know, I think if I was counseling somebody about their own personal finances, here's what I would tell them. I would say, hey, if you are falling into debt, if you are going and running a budget deficit, we need to look at your budget. It's plain and simple. We just need to open your books and let's look at what you're spending your money on. I do not think we are doing that as a city. I'm not seeing that. I also see millions of dollars on the consent calendar coming through and really nothing really being challenged. It's kind of feels like it's just a constant spending without really looking carefully.
Thank you, Jerome. And Chris.
Thank you. So in my conversations with small businesses in Redwood City on Broadway, they've been nickeled and dimed left and right, permitting fees for their parklets. And so I would not support new taxes on businesses, on small businesses particularly. Right now, they need our support. And so, of course, I'm faced with the challenge of how to finance that gap, how to close that gap. And so I'd work with our unions, our SEIU, unionized workers that work for the city to make sure, as well as our firefighters union as well, that if it comes to that, they're on the same page as we are.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
So talking about the budget obviously is always, it is such a balancing act. It's probably the most difficult question that you've asked this evening. I would say that I think the future of budgeting and cutting costs at the city level is really going to be in consolidating departments and sharing services countywide. We need to get rid of the competition for services that led to us being in this debt. And I'd also want to push our state legislators to help us, honestly. There are some reasons why we were in this situation because of benefits packages and low return on some of our CalPERS investments.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
Thank you. I just want to put some perspective on this. My husband and I have lived in Redwood City for 20 years. When we first got here, we were still suffering from the .com bubble of 2000. Everyone was fleeing as that, we'd never have a surplus budget again. And these things are cyclical. And then we had a surplus, and then the housing crunch in 2007, 2008 put us in a deficit situation again, but we came out of it again. Right now it's cyclical because of COVID. So I think we need to have patience and look at a long term. I am not in favor of increasing taxes on our small businesses and our restaurants who have suffered so much.
Thank you, Kaya. Okay, we've got one more question in this round, and this one is going to be about transportation. Michelle, if you don't mind putting it in the chat again. So this question is, a lot of residents have raised concerns about unequal access to affordable transportation, lack of safe bike corridors, and problematic micromobility options. I know we've all heard a lot of scooter complaints. So what do you see as Redwood City's most pressing transportation needs, and how do you propose to address them? And we will start with Jerome this time, and then Chris after.
Well, for me, as I mentioned earlier, we can't talk about building more housing without talking about transportation. So, for me, I'm a big fan and proponent of really looking and digging into seeing how we can get the ferry system online. It's something that I think is very exciting. We are surrounded by water. I had the opportunity of being in Venice last summer, and I watched how water can be used as a transportation corridor. It's fantastic. It's awesome. So for me, thinking in terms of innovation, I love the ferry system. I think it would provide the opportunity for people who live here to be able to own a home somewhere else in the peninsula and have it be reasonable and not add traffic or congestion. So I'm hoping to work on a project like that and think of other innovative ways that we can talk about transportation moving forward in this area.
Thank you, Jerome. Chris.
Thank you. So luckily, Samtrans and Caltrain have the Clipper participate in the Clipper Start program to make, which provides low cost 50% cost fares to low income qualifying riders. So that's one way to make our public transit more affordable, but more so, I want to make Samtrans free. I want to work with the San Mateo County Transit District to make it free. As for the scooters, I supported the micromobility pilot and encouraged the city to provide that emergency number so that people can report fallen scooters and get them upright again.
Great, thank you, Chris. Margaret.
Yeah, I think, I support creativity when it comes to trying to solve this problem. And I applauded the scooter program until it just seems like it really isn't working anymore. People are using them as recreational vehicles and just, having fun with them, and they're not really solving the problem. But I would support certainly more bike and pedestrian safety measures, protected bike lanes, safer intersections. And I would agree with Jerome that I'm a big supporter of the ferry. I really hope that that happens. But in addition, I'd really like to see more seamless connections in the transportation systems that already exist, and expansion of those.
Great, thank you, Margaret. We'll move on to Kaya.
Yes, so it's the last mile is the problem. So this is what experts will tell you is that, and I would be an example. I live next to a major artery, and I'm ashamed to say that I don't take the bus because I live 1.7 miles away from downtown, but I would have to transfer. So even though I live next to a major artery, it would just take me so much longer to get downtown if I took a bus than if I rode my bike, or maybe it would be the same amount of time as if I walked. And so it's the last mile is the problem, and it's a tough problem, and I will work with all these wonderful people trying to solve it. It's not an easy answer.
Thank you, Kaya. We're going to move on to Allison, and then we've got a challenge at the end.
Okay, thank you. I am somebody that rides my e-bike every day. I do believe that some low-cost safety, first of all, low-cost just painting the green lanes can go a long way. When we do make decisions for bike safety, like the ones on Middlefield going down to Costco, are a nightmare. People pulling in and out of their driveway, parking in the bike lane. So we've done a lot of very expensive stuff with the bike, supporting the biking, and we've wasted a lot of money. So I would encourage some wiser study on some of that. With respect to the downtown scooter program, I think if we have fewer of them and it was a little bit more controlled, I've seen some 12-year-olds almost crack their head open. And as a mom, I just, I wanted to call that number right away. But I do think I've been a member of a weekly working.
I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, you said you had a challenge.
Oh, yes, thank you. I would just like to challenge my colleague, Margaret Becker. In response to what you said about the scooters, I'm one of the people who rides the scooter to get around town to the post office. But it's still expensive, right? It's $5 for me to get from my house to even just the post office. So I'd want to work with Bird and the city to get it cheaper so that more people can use it. But more than that, we need to invest in education and working with Redwood City Together, with PAL, with SAL, to make sure that kids that are riding these scooters are doing so safely with their helmet on. So there are a variety of ways to make this program work for us. It just takes a little bit more collaboration.
Margaret, you have 30 seconds to respond, should you choose.
Well, it's not just that it's only kids. It's that, as I think Allison pointed out, they're not wearing helmets. And it would be hard to do enough public outreach and education. I'm not saying I want to scrap the whole program. I'm just saying that it needs to have some changes. And maybe one of the solutions is that it's 18 and over. It's not for kids to be riding around having fun. It's for 18 and over only. But yeah, I agree that it's not worth scrapping, but I don't think it's working quite right as it is.
Thank you, Margaret. All right. I don't see any other challenges, so I'm going to hand it back to Michelle for the next round. We're going to do 45 seconds again.
Yeah, we're gonna do 45 seconds, and this round is for public safety. Let's see. All right. Our first question is going to be about police funding. And we're going to start with Chris, I believe.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on, sorry.
Oh, I apologize.
I didn't ask the question yet. It's okay. You're very eager to answer. It's a very important topic. Okay, the question is, so police departments make up a significant portion of the city's budget, and Redwood City is no different. A recession, a global pandemic, and calls for police reform have affected recruitment and retention. What measures would you take to counteract these challenges to help support police staffing and a safer Redwood City?
Thank you. So we need to maintain funding for our police force since they are understaffed, as you mentioned. One way to tackle the understaffing piece is again through housing. I know I may sound like a broken record, but many of our police officers cannot afford to live in Redwood City, and they're commuting from far distances in the East Bay and even the Valley to serve our community. So I'd like to work with part of San Mateo County, their first-time homebuyer program, with HIP housing to help them find affordable homes to live in the community that they serve.
Now we're going to go to Margaret.
Yeah, so my answer's a little bit, or part of my answer is similar to Mr. Sturkins. We have a very low percentage of our police officers who actually live here. And people talk about a community policing model. And we actually used to have community policing here in Redwood City. We used to have police officers who would go to the neighborhood association meetings and listen to what their concerns were. But because of budget cuts, we don't have that anymore. So when people talk about community policing, they're more talking about it, unfortunately, in this day and age, in a philosophical way. It's sort of a, but it doesn't really exist. So I would really like to see us recruit people who will live here, maybe recruit from the CSM Police Force Academy, and even consider some sort of incentives to live here in Redwood City.
Thank you. Kaya? Oh, you're muted.
I agree that housing is an issue, but I think that it's really important for us to have community policing. It's expensive to fund policing, but it's a necessity. So it's almost irrelevant, the fact that it's expensive. So I think that we just need to keep working hard. I'm in favor of hiring more police women. There have been studies nationally and statewide that have shown that when you have more women on the police force, you tend to sometimes, there are a lot of benefits. And I would also just point out that San Mateo County hired their first female police officer in 1927. Sort of interesting.
All right, Allison.
Thank you. This is really important to me. I think post-pandemic and with the destabilization, we're seeing a spike right now. But I agree with Ms. Eakin in terms of even the budget being cyclical, which is usually finance, real estate, and tech kind of linked. I think that this is cyclical too, but it must be taken seriously. We need the data. And then we also, I'm so excited about the new sheriff, and the county has endorsed the platform of Fixing San Mateo County, of getting the community to the table and civilian oversight. I think we need to recruit and support police officer candidates and keep them in contract in terms of labor contract, really make sure they have the support and training they need. We need the mental health intervention which the county has also endorsed. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Allison. Jerome.
Yes. Without a healthy, well-staffed, well-funded police department, we don't have a city, plain and simple. That's what I believe. So I'm fully staffed, well-trained, homegrown police department that is as diverse as the community it serves. So we need to recruit locally. I resonate with a few others here who've said, yeah, we have officers that are driving from really far away. They can't afford to live here. Imagine a police department that was fully staffed, fully resourced, filled with people who came from this community, from even the neighborhoods that they serve, came up through the cadet program, all that stuff. So yeah, I would push to fill those vacancies and to recruit locally.
Great. Okay, great. I'm going to talk about the next question is about the ACE program that the city council just voted on last week. And this was in direct response to the disruptions that we saw in Courthouse Square in downtown. That was that they were affecting local businesses and there were some youth on bikes that the city was trying to kind of, help, just trying to curb these disruptions. So I want to know what your thoughts are on this new pilot program, or do you think the city should do more to address the needs of youth in our community? And I want to start with Margaret.
Yes, it's really unfortunate. There used to be so many more opportunities for youth here in Redwood City. And then we lost Malibu Grand Prix and the skating rink and the roller rink. And I think that's part of the problem. I'd love to see a way to try to bring more businesses to Redwood City for teens, more activities for them. I'm a big supporter of the work that Redwood City Together is doing and their partnership with PAL and other programs to address this issue.
Great. Kaya.
Yes, I support the ACE program. I think it's a good beginning. And, the problem is youth with not enough to do in the afternoon. That's part of the problem. Part of the problem is violence and crime and people getting hurt. And that is a problem, but there's also a problem of kids not having enough to do. The library has fantastic programs for teens. Some teens just are never going to step foot in a library. And so perhaps some of the vacant storefronts in downtown can be repurposed with, tag, what is that? Target tag or some of these fun kind of activities. It's a problem. ACE is a good start.
Right, great. Allison.
Thanks. Yeah, I ride my e-bike every day all over, and I'm frequently downtown late at night too. And so many of these kids are just really good kids. And, there have been firecrackers shot off very close to my bike. And, I do think that we need to bring those activities back. We used to have an Americana bowling alley. We had the fun center that got ripped out as soon as somebody just got a study session and they need a general plan amendment. So we are losing family draw youth opportunities. I'd have to say I attended the last Improvement Association meeting. I think Alex Kojikian is a great person to lead this. It is being noted as running already at a deficit and it needs to be more funded. They are looking for mentors. I'm interested in doing it. It's a great start. I'm not sure if it's enough or running it just through the IA proper. Thanks.
Jerome.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of close to my heart personally. I started in the city as a youth minister and working with Redwood City youth, and I'm really discouraged as to what I've been seeing the last year or so with some of our young people. I'll say a couple things. The first thing I'll say is that when young people act like that, they are telling you they want to be seen. They're saying they are saying, you are not seeing us, so we're going to show you we're here. It's unfortunate because it's negative behavior. Meeting them where they're at, I think is great. I think ACE is a good start. I'm also really supportive of the PAL and their work, I think, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a city that is committed to reaching out. So yes, city programs are good. The faith community, in my opinion, needs to step up. I think we all need to step up. We have tons of kids from Redwood City in juvenile hall right now. It's not good. And it's going the wrong direction, and they need us.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jerome. Chris.
Thank you. I commend Redwood City Together and Police Activities League and the city for this amazing collaboration called ACE to get kids into jobs and give them opportunities to bicycle around Redwood City safely and to learn bicycle etiquette and safety protocol to make sure that they don't get hit by cars. So I really support this program and would like to see the city turn to it as a model and replicate it throughout Redwood City. Thank you.
Awesome. Great, guys. All right. My next question is, recent years have seen an increase in distrust in police and greater calls for transparency. How do you propose to improve relationships between the community and local law enforcement? I'm going to start with Kaya. I'm sorry.
I think that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
So thank you for the question. So important. We have the Police Advisory Committee. They are spearheading a lot of transparency work. I think it's a good start. I think it's important we have the body cams for the police. I think that's important too. Yes, we need to have the police provide a vital service. We cannot be a community of rules if you don't have a mechanism for enforcing those rules, and the police are that mechanism. So we have to work all together to make the police stronger and more vibrant.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Allison.
Thank you. Yes, this is really important. I just want to mention again the county and how this interrelates. I think Redwood City, I think there's just a really good relationship of Redwood City Police with the community. What I've perceived a bit more is trouble at the county level. And I'm so excited about the new elected sheriff. She's neither lazy nor influenced. And I believe that she actually endorsed the fix in San Mateo County to bring the community to the table. And that's what it takes, the community at the table every step of the way. We need to not lose sight that every single piece needs reform. We need to focus on restorative justice, work furlough with restitution, rehabilitative programs.
Sorry to cut you off. Jerome?
Yeah, I think I would say two things. I would say the first thing would be to hire the right people. And the second thing would be to do our best to find people from this area, people who grew up in this area, who grew up in Redwood City, in the neighborhoods that they serve, as close to here as possible and as close to the neighborhoods that they actually are going to serve. The more we do that, I think the more trust we're going to build. I think it's really, there's a thing I read called the power of proximity. And it really is when you're in proximity with someone, you start to build trust and relationship. And I think it's all about proximity and getting those officers from this area and getting them into those neighborhoods. To me, that's the answer.
Right, Chris, you're up.
Thank you. One of the ways to restore trust between our local police and the community is through training, cultural humility training, SOG training, which is sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression training, so that our police force knows how to interact with people of color, with the LGBTQ+ community that they're serving, and that they learn how to unpack their biases in their policing methods. So that's really important for our community to feel safe with our local police. And again, getting our police force to reflect the community that they're serving and be residents of the community they're serving by helping them afford to live in this community.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
Yeah, well, so I guess the trust issue does go back to what I was talking about before, and that many other panelists have talked about, the need to have our police force living in the community and be a part of the community. That's really what I think is going to help build trust. I think we need maybe some changes in the police department. I just really need a different culture where all of our officers are focused on being truly protecting. And I think I agree with Chris about training. I know that the training that police officers are required to have at this point is pretty minimal on a yearly basis. I think it goes beyond just the training that Chris was talking about, but more ongoing training that is not just about the hours put in, but what testing of what they're actually learning.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, and I think Kaya, go ahead.
No, I've gone.
Oh yeah, that was you were first. Okay, the next question I have for you guys is, I think, something that we kind of touched on, some of you guys have mentioned, but let me go ahead and let's talk about it in detail. So our neighbors, North Fair Oaks Community Council, sent a letter of support to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors endorsing a sheriff's oversight committee. Redwood City didn't. Several other organizations and local officials have too, including some of our own city council members who are current city council members. What is your stance on a civilian oversight board for the sheriff? And we're going to start with Allison.
Thank you. I absolutely support it. I spoke at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and they have recently adopted it. So they did take the recommendation of fixing San Mateo County. I wish that Redwood City had also sent that letter. I do believe the community needs to be at the table. I really applaud the Board of Supervisors. It's a county level issue. I would like to see us do it. Again, I want to remark that I think relations with the Redwood City Police Department are really good. And I just happen to know, living east of 101 at Dogtown, they're called a lot. They're just absolutely fantastic. I do agree that we all need constant training to kind of up our game, I guess, and be more responsive. But I do believe, again, that the issues have been more with the county. But
Yep, that was time.
Community.
Okay, Jerome.
I do think we need transparency. We need some accountability. I think we need to balance that, and that's a tough balance, because we need to allow them to also be able to do their jobs and to be the protectors of our city that they are. We want them to feel like they can protect us. But yes, I think it's generally, I'll say, I think we want the community to be able to come to the table and to be able to provide some insight and some accountability, and so that again, maybe that helps bring more of that transparency and that proximity. Maybe it brings more of that. I hope it does. I'd like to see how it works. I think we need to watch and see how it all unfolds. But I think so. I would say I would like to do that with caution, because I want to make sure that the police feel supported as well.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you. I support civilian oversight of the county sheriff's office. I supported this as a member of the police reform task force with the San Mateo County Democratic Party early on in the pandemic. But I'm confident that our newly elected sheriff will do a fantastic job. She has championed non-lethal methods of force and reforms to restore community trust and ensure that we don't have unnecessary loss of life. Folks who have issues with mental health or struggling, that they get the help they need and are not targets of senseless violence.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
Yes, so I think the oversight board is a good idea. I'll be really interested to see how it's where it goes and how it's implemented. I think the Redwood City Council actually is going to be discussing something about this at their next meeting. So that will be an interesting discussion. I do want to point out, though, that something that no one else has pointed out, that on the Redwood City Police Department website, there's extensive dashboards that you can look at that keeps track of the police department, and it's actually pretty incredible. I think I applaud the police department for what they're doing in that area. And I also want to mention something no one else has, that we have a mental health person that's on the by the county to help with those calls that are about suicide and domestic violence, and that's a really good thing too. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Kaya.
Yes, I'm going to quickly say I support the sheriff oversight committee, and I also support the new sheriff. But I'm going to diverge a minute and say that I do not believe that the county sheriff should be an elected position. In Redwood City, Dan Mulholland is, interviewed and hired by city management. And historically in California, sheriffs were appointed by staff. And then there was a powerful sheriff in San Francisco a while ago. And so then they made it elected. I don't think, because the district attorney is elected and he's the one who makes the policy decisions about law enforcement, my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna have Leah do the next round, and it's gonna be, I believe, 30 seconds for the next round.
Okay, sounds great. All right, this is also a kind of mixed bag of questions. So the first thing we're going to start with is city management. So what I want to know is, what letter grade would you give our city manager, Melissa Stevenson Diaz, and why? And we will start with Jerome. You have 30 seconds on the clock.
A letter grade, I think I'm going to steer away from giving anybody a letter grade. I'm going to say that she works very hard. I know that about her, and she isn't perfect, but I think that she does, a lot of times she does the best job she can with the materials and all of the different numbers that she has. I would like to see some changes, and we can get into those, later.
Thank you, Jerome. We're going to go to Chris next.
Thank you. I hesitate to assign a letter to a person. I think City Manager Stevenson Diaz has done the best that she can, given the workload, given all of the moving pieces. I believe as far as our relationship with labor, one area that we can improve is supporting union labor on projects going forward.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not going to say it's not a fair question, but I would definitely agree that it's not a good idea to give a letter grade to someone who you may be working very closely with in the near future. I think that she's a very good city manager. Like Jerome, there are some things that I might like to see a little bit different, but let's face it, she's done a fantastic job steering the city through the COVID epidemic, and she's really had some budget challenges that she's managed beautifully.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
I would reiterate what Margaret said. Mrs. Diaz has done a phenomenal job. She hails from Mountain View, an extremely well-managed city. She's a high-level professional who works extremely hard. She's highly trained and educated, and we're very lucky to have her skill set at our disposal. So I support her.
Thank you, Kaya. And Allison.
Thanks. I'll tell just a quick little story. In journalism school, or in my major, we had a really good teacher called Avis, and he was such a hard grader. We called him Beavis. So I think it's hard to pick a letter grade not knowing how people would, have different perspectives for rating. I do think that there's room for more collaboration and a stronger voice for the council to give more direction. She's the CEO. And I do believe much more cost cutting could have been done. I believe Dogtown should have been 100% approached differently. So I think there are some areas where there should have been a different outcome.
Thank you, Allison. All right, we are going to move on to a couple of questions about development. So this question will start with Chris. Question is that the Bay Area, as we all know, has become a hub for tech and life science industry, and Redwood City is no exception. Do you support continued development of Redwood City shores? Why or why not? Starting with Chris, 30 seconds.
Thank you. And just to clarify, when you say Redwood City shores, you are referring to the bay side of Redwood City?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So as we discussed earlier, we are facing the very real threat of sea level rise. And so I hesitate to support a new development along our bay side unless it is, there are restorative habitat measures in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
So I will point out that I'm the only candidate in District 2 who's endorsed by the Sierra Club, if that gives you any clue about my view on this issue. In general, I am not supportive of development on the east side of 101. I think you can never say never. There are all sorts of considerations in every single development proposal, and every single one needs to be looked at really carefully, thoughtfully, and balancing pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya?
I support horizontal levees, development of horizontal levees on the bay, on the shore side of Redwood City. I support habitat restoration on the bay side of Redwood City. Historically, we have lost, I want to say, 70% of our bay because, as recently as 50 years ago, you just sort of dumped garbage in the bay, and we need to step back from that.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison?
Hi, I do not support high density development east of 101. I think there's room for medium density. I think there's room for all kinds of flexible options, including affordable housing east of 101. I would like to say there are so many fantastic questions in the Q&A, and I would invite people, please email me at my website, maddenforredwoodcitycouncil.com, and that's rwccouncil.com. I would like to answer all of those. I think I've answered this one, and I just want to acknowledge the public comments, the questions.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, lastly, we have Jerome.
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer is east of 101. My knee-jerk reaction would be no, I don't support high density development out there. To echo, I think it was Margaret that said never say never. I think development is a long process of feasibility studies, and there's a lot that goes into it. And there may be something somewhere down the road where maybe a medium development makes sense for that area, and the benefits for the community and the environment are actually great, and it gets things to be better than when they started. So, but generally high density, no.
Thank you, John. Okay, we have one more question related to this. So we'll start with Margaret this time. Speaking of development, we have, of course, more office space and job opportunities. That means more housing needs. So how do you think the city should address the jobs housing imbalance with the push for more commercial development? Do you think there should be an office cap or some other restrictions on development?
Let me just say we should approach it thoughtfully and carefully. And I know I've said that before, but I truly believe that every single project needs to be considered independent and as a whole. We need to make sure that our developers are doing their part to to provide community benefits. But the jobs to housing imbalance is, as of now, it's continuing to be exacerbated. So we need to come up with really, truly creative solutions.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya?
Well, I would just point out that housing is expensive to build as compared with office. When you build housing, you have to provide more schools, you have to provide more parks, you have more sewage, you have, housing is expensive, but we must build way more housing. So it's kind of easy to do just all office because it's cheaper, it brings in more tax base, but we're not going to do the easy thing. We're going to do the hard thing, and we're going to build more housing.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison? I think you're still muted, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do support a cap on the commercial until we have more of our residents and our neighbors homed. And I agree with Mr. Sturkin on this. I believe we need more retail downtown, anchor retail, and we need to support our small and medium businesses. I would also like a green zone downtown. So I think that we've had the Gateway project and even study sessions, and then we've seen developers think, well, then it's approved. And that's how we lost the fun center. And there is a lot more community benefits that need to be negotiated.
Thank you,
So,
Allison.
thank you.
Jerome?
Back to development. So, I think I mentioned this earlier. It's really important that we listen to the community, and the community is definitely speaking specifically on the amount of the square footage of office space that is being proposed. There's a lot of it, and people ask why, and developers look at a long view of assets. They look at something from the 15 to 20 year view, and they're looking at it in a very different lens than we are. But as a city, it's important that we listen to our constituents. We listen to people in the city saying, look, we're questioning this. Why is this happening? So
Thank you, Jerome. I'm gonna cut you off there.
Okay.
And Chris.
Thank you. We need to build more affordable housing, specifically extremely low income housing in Redwood City. And so that is one way to address the jobs housing imbalance, is by building more housing, more affordable homes in Redwood City through collaborations with nonprofit affordable housing developers like Hip Housing, like Eden Housing, Midpen, the list goes on. We have already done it, and we can do more.
Thank you, Chris. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to move on to the next question. It's still a little bit related to development. We're going to start with Kaya this time. So we've heard some concerns from officials and residents about the character of neighborhoods. So my question to you is, do you believe that new developments, whether it's housing, commercial, retail, etc., pose a threat to the so-called character of our neighborhoods? And if so, how would you address that threat? And again, we'll start with Kaya.
So character defining features, that's what the Secretary of Interior Standards describes our historic resources. Redwood City is lucky in that it's the oldest town on the peninsula. It's the oldest town between San Francisco and San Jose. And Redwood City is lucky because we have so many amazingly beautiful historic resources with character defining features, and new development can fit in. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Kaya. And Allison.
Thank you. I don't think that the development we have done has affected the neighborhoods. I think Redwood City was really fortunate, and this also spurned, I think, some of our issues, and that was this entire huge urban downtown was under development and very much ripe for a renaissance. So I think we've been really lucky to develop the downtown and to now be focusing on the transit high density. I don't think we need to encroach into the neighborhoods. I do think the single family home neighborhoods. I used to live on King Street before I moved over to the water. I think it's important to preserve the diversity.
Thank you. Jerome.
So yeah, the question is really broad, and when you're talking about development affecting the character of a neighborhood, you're talking about something extremely specific. So it's really difficult to answer such a broad question. But I think in general, we have to, because we have such limited space, we have to be really intentional about exactly where we build and when we build it at this point, because we've just got no more space. So I'm not interested in putting a building where it doesn't need to be. I would rather see buildings, especially higher denser buildings, be in transit oriented areas and things like that. But it just depends on where you build.
And Chris.
Thank you. I live in a 10-unit, one-story complex of small studios that look like cottages in the heart of Centennial, mixed in with single-family homes. So I think there is a place for accessory dwelling units, for duplexes, for small homes that fit the character of the community. But I also want to prioritize, again, new homes along transit corridors, the transit district and Woodside Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Margaret.
Yeah, several years ago, I wrote a white paper on missing middle housing that I discussed with each and every city council member. And it's very much exactly what we're talking about here. That it's entirely possible to make buildings be duplexes and triplexes and still have them maintain a neighborhood character. That doesn't mean that I would advocate for large development. I think what Jerome said is accurate. We really need to think about where different types of projects are going in. And I believe density in the downtown area is great. I think I'm out of town, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I know it's really fast. We've got one more 30-second one. Yeah, I believe that was everyone. Yes. Okay. So we're going to start with Jerome this time. And I'm sorry, we're going to start with Allison this time. That's right. Okay. So the question is, Redwood City is home to a diverse population, as we all know, lots of immigrants, non-English speakers, youth, seniors, people with disabilities, etc. And yet all of our city council candidates are white and English speaking. So how would you, as a new council member, reach the city's underserved or underrepresented communities?
Absolutely, that's a good point. I'd also like to say that we need to focus on every single committee, commission, board, and department and make sure there's representation across the board in every way. Right now, our port department is 5 Caucasian people, and 4 of them I think are men over 50. So I think we need more diversity. It's an incredibly important board. I would like to see women and Asian women and Latinas, and we had a really impactful speaker at the last council meeting, and we didn't have translation ability. I would make sure that that is always there. Open door going into the neighborhoods.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. I think the timer started a little late, but I was checking the clock. Thank you. And we'll go to Jerome.
Yeah, I'm big on bringing people from every corner of Redwood City to the table and saying, look, we want our leadership to look like the community that it serves. And so I think outreach to all the communities when we have recruitments for boards, for committees, commissions, all that, I think really important to make sure that we are reaching out to all the communities and saying, we want representation here. It's really important because we want all perspectives and we want all voices, because this is our city and we all need to be at the table together to solve the problems together.
Thank you, Jerome. And Chris.
This is really important to me because I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm a renter to communities that often aren't represented in city governments. But I believe we need to do bilingual outreach. We need to be reaching out to communities of color in Redwood City and creating a pipeline for members of historically excluded communities to get on boards, commissions, and committees, and eventually run for council.
Thank you, Chris. Let's see, Margaret.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, that my skills are really oriented towards outreach and collaboration. And I think that's something that's beneficial in terms of attracting different skill sets. We absolutely need more diversity, 100%. I think we need to connect better with our faith communities, with our neighborhood associations. Bilingual is absolutely crucial, and we need to have representation that better represents the diversity in Redwood City.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya, go ahead.
You know, I think that we're on our way. We have district elections, and one of the reasons we have district elections is to improve underserved representation. I was walking in District 5 on Saturday, and I ran into many members of the community, and in particular, a member of an underserved community. And I introduced myself and said I hoped to be representing her. And she said, I've lived in this house all my life and no one has ever come to my door and asked me what my ideas or concerns are. And it made me feel good to say, well, I'm here and I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we are going to jump into we've got a handful of questions that came in through the Q&A. I think we have time for about 3. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're gonna do, Michelle, we're gonna do 30 seconds or 15?
I think we have time to do 30-second questions. Let's try for that.
Okay. I think 15 is just so short. Okay. We're going to do 30 seconds. First question, we're going to start with Jerome this time. The question that we got from one of our listeners is, one of the top priorities of our current council is children and youth, yet Redwood City is consistently overrepresented in our juvenile hall. What would you do to address this issue?
Well, I mean, I tried to answer a little bit earlier, but I'll just reiterate I'm supportive of the ACE program, work with the PAL, bring agencies together to reach out to these young people, work with the faith communities as well, encourage them to go out and to do lots of different types of outreach, reach them where they're at. I really think it is great that there's bikes being used, kids on bikes, and there are people that are going out to them with bikes and teaching them things. I think that you meet the kids where they're at and they're going to listen to you.
Thanks, Jerome. Chris, on to you.
Thank you. I believe we need to address the school to prison pipeline. We need to look at our policies and disciplinary policies in our local school districts. And as a city council member, I will work closely with our Redwood City Elementary School District and Square Union High School District as part of the 2x2x2 committee, hopefully, to evaluate those policies and reform them such that we are supporting all of our students equitably.
Thank you, Chris. Margaret.
I'm glad Chris just mentioned the 2x2x2 committee. That is a very important piece of this puzzle. We do have a lot of players that can help with this. We have our Fresh Lifelines for Youth nonprofit that helps keep our youth out of the prison system. We have the ACE program. We have Redwood City Together. So I would want to try to coordinate services with all of those organizations.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
Yes, to the extent that we have resources, I would put them with our youth. Child Advocates is another organization where adult volunteers pay attention to kids that don't get paid very much attention to, and all these other organizations that my colleagues have been describing too. We need resources, we need imagination, so that those young kids and those young brains can imagine something other than a cell wall. And we just keep working at it.
Thank you, Kaya. And we've got Allison.
Thank you. This is very important to me. Again, it is also at the county level. And I think that the new sheriff and the civilian oversight that's been approved and fixed in San Mateo County is very dialed into this. I've worked with nonprofits that have worked with Governor Newsom to close all the juvenile prisons in the state. And I don't believe that we need a juvenile hall. I think there's alternatives. I would really want to work with the Civilian Oversight Committee and the sheriff and the DA and really look at the data and who's being perhaps disproportionately not targeted, but identified and prosecuted. And I know it's a
Thank
county.
you, Allison. I got to cut you off. Okay, I got everyone right. Believe so. Yeah, okay. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next question from one of our listeners. This is also about representation, so we'll start with Chris this time. The question is, while candidates represent districts, they will be voting on issues that affect the entire city. And the listener was interested in learning what the candidates know about the other districts and how they're engaging with members of those districts. And we'll start again with Chris.
Thank you. I've lived in other districts of Redwood City, in Woodside Plaza, in downtown, and now in Centennial. And as for how I'm outreaching to other districts, I've participated in other neighborhood associations in Redwood City. Anywhere I have lived, I've always made a point to get involved in my local community. And I will continue to participate in community events and go to where my residents are, no matter what district they are in, and meet people where they are at, because that is how you get true community participation.
Thank you, Chris. And Margaret.
I recently went to the Redwood Shores candidate forum out in Redwood Shores and took an evening to meet with people there and answer their questions. So I think that's a decent indication of my interest and ability to talk to and make sure that I'm hearing people in other districts. I believe it's a part of the oath of office if when you're sworn in as a council member to say that you are representing everybody in Redwood City and not just your district.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
I couldn't agree more with Margaret. I too was there with Margaret. I get emails from my Redwood Shores neighbors almost on a daily basis right now. Everyone on this Zoom can talk and chew gum at the same time, or walk and chew gum at the same time. We can meet with the residents in our neighborhood and the residents throughout Redwood City, and we will.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison.
Thank you. I also attended the Redwood Shores Forum, and we are getting a lot of emails from the Redwood Shore folks about the life science project. And I want to let everyone know I read every email. I collect them together. I will actually be responding to every one of those emails. I also want to say that I'm sorry, the question's not in the chat. I'm sorry, can you repeat it specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So while our candidates represent districts, they're voting on issues that affect the entire city. So how will you be engaging with members of those districts?
Right, absolutely. I also lived in a different district on King Street, and I'm very familiar with all of the Port Department issues, which is in Councilmember Garnica Espinosa's district. I would be working with her on those issues as well as North Fair Oaks. And I build relationships and work across every kind of person. That's what I have been known for in my Silicon Valley career across all roles and departments.
Thank you. And Jerome.
Yeah, if I become a council member, I will serve all of Redwood City. I currently have friends in every district, and that's from the end of Spring Street all the way up to Emerald Hills, back down to my district, back down to downtown. This has been my city for over 20 years. I love this city, and if I become council member, I'm here to serve everyone in the city.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, everyone. We're going to do one last listener question. We're going to do this super rapid fire, 15 seconds. I think this question works for that. And this time we will start with Margaret. The question for you is, could you talk about a Redwood City Council member, current or past, that you look up to? And we will start with Margaret.
There are many. I think probably the first council member I ever met in Redwood City was Barbara Pierce. So I really look up to her, and I can't have to mention Ian Bain. He's also been very instructive to me. So those are my two.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
So many years ago, I remember sitting at La Tartine with Barbara Pierce and taking notes, because I would say, well, this idea and that idea, and then she would calmly explain to me how it was a good idea, but how, what the restraints were. And of course, Ian Bain.
Thank you, Kaya. Allison.
Thank you. I would also say Barbara Pierce. She was so involved in making Courthouse Square happen and the firehouse station, the library that was under redevelopment, but she made it happen. When we spoke about Pete's Harbor and the carnage that was happening, she really cared. I just believe that she's somebody that I think brought a lot of humanity and heart to the role.
Thank you. Jerome.
I would say Ian Bain. And it's not that I agree with him about everything, but what I love about him is that he listens to everybody and he treats everybody like, hey, you're the only person that exists right now. He really does listen and do a good job of listening to everybody in the city. So I respect him.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you. Former council member Michael Smith, he paved the way for folks like me to run and win for city council, and I am proud of his work he's accomplished. And current new council member Elmer Martinez Ceballos, I also look up to him very much so.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to hand things over to Michelle.
Great. Guys, we are down to 10 minutes. It's amazing. We did it. Okay, great. I want to give the candidates time to talk about themselves a little bit. So this next round is 60 seconds each, and it is a closing statement. You guys get to tell us a little bit about yourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start. I think the last time we started with Chris. So let's go ahead and start with Margaret. Why don't you go ahead and give me your closing statement? What do you want to tell us? And go ahead.
I think I started the last round, but I don't mind. I'll go first. Okay. So in closing, I guess I'd like to just say that being on council for me would not be something out of the ordinary, I guess I would say. It's really just a continuation of a lifetime of commitment to social causes that I've demonstrated throughout my life. As a Peace Corps volunteer, as a nonprofit leader, as a community organizer, and as a public health professional for over 20 years. Much of what I've done in my whole life has been to improve the lives of others. I think council really does need someone like me on council right now, a collaborator who can build consensus, who can come up with creative, forward-thinking ideas. Much of what I've done on housing and human concerns was not on anyone's radar until the former chair of HHCC and I came up with the ideas. And also someone who's really committed to responding to residents. I've been out in the community, and in my district, at least, a lot of people are telling me that they don't feel heard by city council. And I would be that type of council member.
Thank you, Margaret. Kaya.
I'd like to thank Redwood City Pulse for hosting this. Democracy can only thrive when you have a strong press. So thank you for this opportunity. I was born in Redwood City. I went to high school in Redwood City. I had my first adult job in Redwood City. It's always felt like home to me. I have a degree in law from UC Davis, and I worked for 20 years up in San Francisco, representing clients in the law. And then I wanted to become more involved in my Redwood City community. So starting in about 2008, I became more involved. I took the PACT class and the Chamber of Commerce leadership class. I served on the Historic Resources Advisory Committee for 8 years. That's where I got the character defining feature lessons. I've been a volunteer with Child Advocates for 20 years, helping a family. My parents instilled in me.
That's fine. All right, and let's move on, Allison.
Thank you. I believe I have a demonstrated commitment to working tirelessly for affordable housing, for alternative flexible housing arrangements, and for at-risk populations. I represent tenants in evictions and am well-versed in the kinds of targeted supportive ordinances we can enact to protect tenants. I support the Faith in Action platform for housing security. I support building housing at every level at a quick pace, as if there's not a second to spare, because there isn't. I support the finance cost savings I spoke about earlier. Again, I believe I can find the 25 million we needlessly spent on Dogtown. I do from federal, county, regional, and other sources. I do work across roles. I'm supportive and professional. I believe sometimes the council can benefit from somebody taking a strong position and having creative, divergent thinking. I'm business positive, having spent over 15 years in-house as a tech attorney. I've been a nonprofit founder, a businesswoman, and owner of my own law practice, and a citizen advocate. I bring a fresh approach to Redwood City and already have professional
Thank
relations
you, Allison.
and earned respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerome.
Redwood City is a great city. It's my home. It's home to me and my family. And, you know, as a city, we face a lot of challenges: safety and security of our city, growing budget deficit, continued housing shortage, growing homeless population. As your council member, I'll fight for the city that I love. I will support a fully staffed, well-trained, homegrown police department that is diverse as the community it serves. I will continue to advocate for the creation of housing at all levels, as well as improve our transportation systems. I'm going to continue to work with people on our streets and bring county services together with city services and the faith community as well. One of my big goals would be to get homeless population zero, but we got to work together and do that all together. I'll be a good steward of the finances. I'll get us back to a balanced budget. I'll fight for our young people, and I will always listen.
Thank you, Jerome. Chris.
Thank you. I'm running to keep Redwood City a safe, livable, and affordable community for everyone. I grew up on the peninsula, and to a hardworking family. My dad worked for Caltrain as a manager. My mom at my local elementary school as an after-school care provider. And I attended public schools, including Carmont High School, that many Redwood City residents attend. And as of states, I earned a degree in environmental studies, focus on environmental sustainability and social justice, and then served in AmeriCorps, working for the city of Hayward on their greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And I've also worked for Green Foothills and now HIP Housing for over 3 years, fundraising for their affordable housing program. So I have personal experience helping house our community, and on city council, I want to fight for more affordable homes and a safe and livable and affordable community for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your Monday to listen and to listen into the Redwood City's first ever candidate forum. I want to also thank our 5 candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Redwood City is so fortunate to have these civic-minded citizens willing to devote their time and energy to making the city a better place. For more of our coverage on the city council races and other local races, go to our website. The website is wrcpulse.com, and please subscribe to our newsletter. It's a daily newsletter every morning at 10 a.m. A recording of this forum is going to be up tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, guys. Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.